Good day, my fellow Americans and good people of the world. Today I'd like to address you in regards to America's 250th birthday. This week we are revving up for the big day of celebration of July 4th, 2026, 250 years since the founding of America by Declaration of Independence. And I would like to take this moment as a continuation of my prior videos where I was musing about where we've been and where we are and where I foresee that we can be going together as a nation. And I want to take this moment to talk a little bit about faith. And the reason why I want to have this conversation is because I've been reading this book. I read this book called The Theory of the American Founding, and it's I'm pretty sure that's the title of it, and essentially it talks about gives a frame of reference of the historical context, the situational context, and the fine context of the beginning stages of America's founding. And one of the sets of ideas that are discussed in this book is the concept of the idea of religion and faith and the First Amendment and the Constitution in terms of the free exercise of religion and the freedom of assembly. And this book kind of like gives this idea that there are many people that try to say that America is a Christian nation and we're founded on Christian principles and we were meant to be a religious nation or something to the effect. And this book really says it can understand where people get that context, but it's more along the lines, if you look into, the correspondence and the communication from the founding fathers between individuals of that time as they're discussing and they're contemplating, what's our purpose and how are we going about this thing we call, a United States of America. And you read the Federalist Papers and all of these things essentially say, it's kind of pointless to have a republic if you don't have people who are themselves moral and able to follow the law. The Constitution is just an embodiment of laws that codify how we're going to govern ourselves. And it doesn't matter how many laws you put on the book if people themselves are not law-abiding. And that is something that's wholly an individual, ethical, moral thing. But the founding fathers knew, you can't legislate morality. And we shouldn't want to legislate morality because then it becomes this perversion of religion that then becomes as if somehow the laws of man can, justify God and the laws of nature and nature's God. And so they understood that there was room by which the nation really had to champion for religion, not propagandize it and not embed it in the founding principles of the nation, but at the same time encourage faith, because laws only work because of our faith and our belief in what they represent and what they stand for, not just a sense of the letter of the law of thou shalt not sort of thing, but in the sense of understanding that this is our social and civic contract with one another. This is what we do in order to make sure we're a civil society. We have to abide by this understanding of what is right and what is wrong, what we should do, what we could do, and what we ought not to do. And faith gives us this basis by which we kind of get it already and know, the concept of all the laws are distilled into the one word of love thy neighbor. That one ideal embodies all the laws. Like if you just follow that, you follow that which is like the living answer to the golden rule. And I always add in the platinum rule, which is, treat others as they want to be treated. That in itself is enough to keep us in mutual accords with one another. And they understand, the founding fathers understood it, and most logical people know there is wickedness in everybody. There's potential for good and there's potential for bad. And what comes out of us is an expression of that to which we are conditioned in the environments we're around and the people we surround ourselves with. And that's why the idea of religion was so compelling as a concomitant, conciliatory, kind of like working in an auxiliary with the codification of laws, of human-made laws, because it gives people a sense of a moralistic conscience of what is right and what is wrong. And this sense of, there is consequences to your bad actions, and there is incentive for your good actions. And, you become blessed as you live out those good things. And the ideal of our nation's founding, establishing the First Amendment of the Constitution, was about making sure that, freedom of religion was about you're free from a religion indoctrinating you and telling you what to do, what to think, what to feel, for it to be imposed upon you, forced conformity. But you're also free to live your faith however that works for you, and by your God, your creator, whatever you align with, you acknowledge as the higher power, the higher order of the universe. I'm a very spiritual person. I'm not religious, although I do respect and value all religions. I believe in a God indivisible. It's like the highest order of the universe, like how everything just falls into place. And so when I think of the Pledge of Allegiance, I always believe in, removing the comma from one nation under God, indivisible. It's one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And to me, that just represents the sense of it's the God that cannot separate us. It is the highest order of the universe. Like, our sovereignty of our nation is of such authority that the only thing above our authority as a nation is a God indivisible, a higher power that nothing else can be divided from. It's like, that's how substantiated we are as a nation, how sovereign and solid and indivisible we are. We are independent from anything else other than the fact that we are a part of this grand creation, a God indivisible. Nothing else can be divided from beyond that. The next order of authority below this grand power is the authority of our sovereign of our nation, because then from there we have a basis of moral legitimacy. I say, as close as you can get to creating this integrity of a higher power, higher order, we're second only to the creator of the universe. And so to me, this idea really embodies the sense that our nation wasn't, one religion or one faith, or one way of looking at, belief and faith and belief. Rather, it's an understanding that everybody sees religion differently. Everybody sees the miracle of life and the wonder of, the universe, and the majesty of like just this perfect alignment and timing that we exist in. And everything happens for a reason, whether you understand it or not. It is all in perfect timing and order. And it gives us something to trust in and believe in that we cannot readily see and make sense of yet. Faith is believing in something that you don't necessarily have evidentiary proof of in front of you. It's a trust, a knowing. And, our concepts of religion have helped us to sense that there's something larger to be known there. And so many religious people have become scientists and help us to discover, the fundamental principles of physics. And was the concept where, many scientists, religious people become scientists, and then they lose their religion and they go through science and then eventually find their way back into religion, because it's the sense of, science makes you believe that there isn't a God because there's so much pattern and order, but then when you really get into it, there's nothing else to explain how this all works other than there is a higher power. And what do you call that? Human words, God. It's Elohim, the Jah. It's the thing that can't really be named, and this Yahweh, and however you want to reference it, the concept is the same. It's this higher order, this higher power. And I always think that as a God indivisible, because it's the same God. It doesn't matter what religion you associate it into to help it make sense in your human mind, because you can only fathom so much of the world. And religion gives us stories that can help us associate our humanness into these grander inner workings of the universe, so we can understand our place in this grand, scenario. And so faith is really not about some kind of like ardent religious, conformity, and there's only one religion and it has to be our way or the highway, or there's one right way and there's wrong way to do religion. It's nothing like that. It's more of the sense of, every religion has something about it that is just this pure essence of truth in their practice of faith and belief. And, if you take the best of each one of these religions and you apply them, we get more of a holistic sense of, we're all saying the same thing, just in our own unique ways, and our ways of choosing to express it are different. And religion gives us a pattern, a framework, a storyline that we can follow to help make sense of everything. And it's when you get into the weird dogma of things that it starts to become a perversion and a distortion, because it's trying to say like, your way of faith and belief is not the true way, or to suggest like everything in the Bible has to be taken literally, and not understanding that there's many analogies and metaphors and storylines to help us to grasp this sense of how do things go about unfolding in this human experience. And I was speaking to this young lady who has been coming by my current residence, where I'm residing at the moment, and she comes by and speaks to me about the Bible and her faith. And one of the things that we got talking to about last week was this sense of the Bible's really kind of like a mirror, and it reflects back to you like where you are in your life. And that's why you can go back and read the Bible same exact verse and chapter and verse, but it's going to resonate with you different at different times of your life because you're in a growing process. And what that means to you now may not be the same thing that it meant to you back then. It changes over time as you change. And that's why, religion can be this ever evolving living practice that you know, live out throughout your entire life, because it's a discovery of the spirit and how it's evoked from within you to express out in a way that is resonant with other people who are on that same level of experience, to say, you're my brother, you're my sister, we're all a part of this same family, and you're a part of my community or my faith. And that gives you a starting point by which you can relate with one another and look past many of the other boundaries and barriers that tend to arise with our variance and diversity in society. So the concept of having faith and belief and making sure that it's allowed safe space to be expressed in society is important. And I believe that's why the founding fathers established it as the First Amendment, to have the freedom of religion and freedom of assembly and freedom of expression, and the freedom of speech, but also, the freedom of press, because there has to be something that we relate to, that we understand, that the Bible is a human construct and it cannot be wholly, completely, 100% the truth taken literally. It doesn't necessarily always equate to the total literal truth. Like, it can be a guide and a reference, kind of like a way to look through and see and perceive things, but it's not the whole, total, end all, be all truth. It can't be. It's a human construct. There's limits to it. So, in our founding fathers wanting to make sure they created safe space for religion to exist and for faith and belief to be developed and cultivated and championed for and encouraged in people, but not any one religion winning over for anybody else, because they understood the fact that faith is a wholly independent, individual, personal thing. I mean, even God gave humans free will, so you can't legislate religion into a law system of governance without corrupting it. It was what founding father and POTUS III Thomas Jefferson said about the separation of church and state, as he wrote a letter kind of expressing deepest respect for religion, understanding that, but in order to make sure that religion doesn't corrupt government and government doesn't pervert the garden of the church, you need to have a wall of separation between those two, in its legitimate form, and that how that barrier is transcended is the individuals who uphold the law in their civic duty of being a law-abiding citizen. They're the ones that uphold the connection between the state and church. That wall, that barrier is broken down within the individual and their freedom of expression and their liberation, their self-determination. And that to externalize that breakdown of that wall is forcing people to conform to something that they will never be able to honestly internalize. And so you're setting them up to be even farther distanced from being able to embrace their spirituality and make that connection with their creator, to embody as they are endowed by their creator the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So the founding fathers understood, you know, we want to encourage and we want to create that safe space for religion and for faith, because we know it does a really good job of helping people to find how to be their best selves, how to cultivate their conscience, how to orient their soul print alignments, the things that they lean into, the things that attract them, the things that they know are right, the things that they know are wrong, the sense of they know their purpose and their place and how they can best serve. Those are all things that religion helps many people to foster and cultivate. You can attain those things outside of religion, but religion is one way to help to figure that out. And it keeps people in a sensibility of communion with one another. And so religion has this amazing power, and it can be a force for good. But when it becomes this power struggle and people try to force it upon others, it distorts it, and it makes religion become hypocrisy. And it makes those who try to force religion onto others themselves hypocrites, and anyone that follows them becomes hypocrites. And even worse so when you have a very corrupt politician trying to legislate religious ideology into some codified law that you yourself cannot adhere to the religion that you're supporting through law. You make yourself a hypocrite. You blemish and blot the religion, and then you lead astray and deceive all of the true faith believers. And so religion has to be a very internal, individual, personal thing. But the founding fathers knew they wanted to have moralistic people run for office, because you could trust a person like that who had an integrity-bound soul print alignment of good humanity, loving thy neighbor and living that embodiment, a sense of moral integrities and ethical bounds, knowing right from wrong, having a conscience. Somebody who practices religion or faith or spirituality intentionally sits with that sensibility and cultivates it and works on it, alone or in community with others. And it becomes this way of being, so that as they live out their lives and they're in service, whether it's public servants or service to their family and their friends, or just a stranger on the street, you know that person is coming from a place of honesty, truth plus timing. And so, our founding fathers really wanted us to look to those type of people to trust in, to make decisions on our behalf, especially if they understood that need for the separation of church and state and respected it and honored it, for the fact that, it also is part of what we need to do in order to create that safe space for freedom of religion. For all religions to exist as beautifully and wonderfully diverse, however you approach your spirituality, has to be free and liberated. And you have to have safe space for that. And we carved that out in the Constitution and the First Amendment. But somebody who practices religion is capable of respecting that way of life on a level that others don't necessarily have the capacity to learn. You don't necessarily have to be a religious person and go to church on the regular, but a sense of understanding the spirit of intent of what religion is really about. The embodiment of the spiritual aspects of yourself. So you connect the mind, the body, and the spirit in this holistic way. So you are yourself complete and whole as a person. So in your role of service to others, you're not self-serving, self-seeking for personal fulfillment and gains. You yourself are complete. you are taking this opportunity in your completeness and your wholeness and your fullness to come into a role to help other people to, transcend barriers or boundaries, or, ascend out of limitations into higher realms so they can self-actualize too. So they can be free and liberated in that way. And it doesn't mean that they have to take a specific course, like following a specific religion, or reading a specific form of the Bible or a specific religious text. It's more of saying, like, we have to make sure that society supports the capacity for people to pursue personal development and self-development. And religion is a big part, and a big method that people use to cultivate that. And so someone who is, spiritually inclined is going to have, a better respect, and they will be able to go into that position of office to seek to liberate other people and to empower them to achieve their best version as well. And so, I, again, am not a religious person. I was raised in Christian Catholic family, and when I was a young child, I used to, when I was staying with my great-grandmother, I would wake up every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning and go out into the living room where she would be sitting in her rocking chair with a single lamp on, and she would be reading her Bible. She was Catholic, and she was devoted to that practice. And she would sit there and she would read her Bible, and I would wake up early and I would go and sit with her. When I was really young, I would sit on her lap and she'd rub my belly and we would read the Bible together. And those were some of my fondest memories of learning of the scripture. It's probably one of the reasons why the Bible is one of my most favorite books. Because I have so many positive, loving, fond childhood memories of sharing scripture with my great-grandmother, who was one of my most favorite, she was my favorite person, one of my most favorite people ever. And so I learned from her the value of, reading scripture and really contemplating and thinking about it. I'd ask her, what's that word? Because her Bible was very old, and it was, some of the words were not, I wasn't used to it being young, and so we would discuss it, and she'd explain it, and I could ask questions of her, and, we learned from each other, this younger generation learning from the older generation, and the older generation learning from the younger generation, as I explained, oh, well, that makes sense in this way. And so, that was one of my fondest, earliest memories of my introduction into the concept of religion. And, we used to go to Mass together when we were together, and we go, I have, as a keepsake from my grandmother, her prayer beads and her rosary, and, I visit them and sit with them often when I take out my altar of prayer and setting my intentions for the month. She's always there with me, and I always reflect, and it's a beautiful part of my life, but I'm not a religious person. I have gone to church many different times throughout my younger years. My family have we moved a lot, so we didn't have a set church we always went to, but we would find a church when we would move somewhere, because it's a great way to make community and find like-minded individuals. And, I remember growing up and going to, Bible school and Bible study, and I was really good at remembering, verses and things like that, because it was, something I already found value in with my great-grandma, but also, I like verses. I like things that are rhymey, and I love words so much, and I love language and synthesis, and I love to read, so it was a really good thing for me. Because we moved a lot, I didn't make a lot of lasting friendships from people in those spaces, but the stories and the cultivation of the community that I witnessed really stuck with me as this is valuable, this is a good thing for many people. I had many bad experiences with religions and going to churches that were really repulsive, and the way they went about representing the sense of what their church was teaching was, I felt, leading away from what I had, believed in my heart, the reason why religion is there and what church is for. And so I learned valuable lessons of, like, not all churches are the same, not all pastors and ministers are the same. They could be preaching from the same chapter and verses, but their interpretation of it is wholly different. I just watched this thing. A newscast was explaining this event that happened at a Bible church camp for youth, like young children. And they set up this scene where a bunch of people with, like, airsoft rifles pushing some person around and then pointing guns at them and shooting them, and so you could hear the sound of the air rifle going off. I don't think they actually shot him, but the sound was there, and the children were made to enthusiastically support the idea of this person being shot at and harmed. The justification that the minister gave for it was that this was a rendition of how we attack the devil, and sorry if it offended you, our way of practicing religion. And to me, like, that's not exactly that, but that was the same sense that I had as a young child, having an experience where it was like, whoa, that's what religion is? Like, I don't want any part of that. Like, what a way to really, like, blemish and tarnish the sense of what religion could do and good for somebody, and then cause somebody to have this distorted and perverted sense of that religion promotes, like, violence amongst us. There may be explanations of, warring and fighting and things like that in the Bible, but we're supposed to use that as a guiding reference of what not to do, not what to do. The things that we don't have to be that way because they're better options. We can just be good people to one another and not be violent, and then, we don't have to worry about those bad things happening. So, there's so many ways that religion can be taken out of context, and it can do great harm. These were young children, impressionable minds, that were led to witness a enacted scene of violence, and regardless of whatever justification was given for the storyline behind it, I don't think that young children should be subjected to violence when they go to church, and so there are ways that, religion can really take a bad turn for people. I do remember some of my fonder memories as an adult going to church. I had a pastor called Harley Davidson. He was awesome. I loved his stories. He always had these engaging personal stories. He spent time, and you could tell he had the might of great care. I loved it so much. To really think about the chapters that he was introducing and the verses, and he brought it in this fun, funky, cool way, very personal. He was a family man, he was a community member, and he was just a good man. And he would introduce these concepts to us in an updated version of it. It's like, oh yeah, so this is what happened in the Bible, and let me reference that to modern day. I've been there, we've all been there, and then community, feeling good feelings and thinking good thoughts, getting a sense of we're not all perfect, man. It's good because we're a work in progress and we're working on it together, and safe space for everybody to practice that. And it was a welcoming situation. And and I went with people who I made fond personal memories with, that helped me from a really dark time, a really difficult, challenging time in my life, where I needed steadiness and I needed, a foundation by which I can rebuild my life on after it being left in utter ruins, after misplacing trust and, my life being, led into this very, very terribly dark place. And it gave me hope. And I found help in good people and good community, and religion was one of those ways that I was able to do that. But I don't seek that personally on my own anymore. It's not something that I felt was like, that's not necessarily how I like to practice my spirituality. And I've cultivated over the years my method, my ways, the things that really helped me to understand and resonate. I'm more of the type of person I like to read my good book and read other books and see how they all relate, and then observe people and the beautiful connections between humans that happen, and that's why I create my human element theory of the human elements, like seeing all the beautiful connections between people and how they're made, and how people relate with one another, how people communicate with one another. And I really embrace that, and that is my spiritual processing. It helps I can see a piece of me in every person, and I can see the good in all people, and I believe in the potential for good in all people. I can also see their wickedness. It's like I hear their wicked voice speaking truth from their unconscious selves, saying things that they think that I don't hear, their tone and their intent. And it's kind of like peering into the heart of an individual and really knowing the attitude and the direction of it. And I can see the spark within them of being able to break out that darkness, kind of be the catalyst for change, for them to move away from their wickedness back into righteousness. And I usually intentionally set the keystone for the catalyst for them to go through their karmatic retribution of time to rebalance themselves. I do that out of love and respect and appreciation, like genuine agape love. I want them to become their best version, and I do it as a corrective, kind of like, a motherly figure of, I don't tell you what to do, what to think, or what to feel, but I give you the insight, the wisdom, the knowledge you need to hear in that moment that is going to resonate with you and help to, break the chains to which you are bound by, like, your wicked tendencies. And I don't try to practice that with everybody, because some people kind of like sense that and then they go into attack mode because they think that I'm like trying to attack them. But it's a defense mechanism that they bring up. It's usually their ego's worthless defense, and all I am really trying to do is just like show them a realm of truth that they may not be able to see about themselves. And do so, in love and honesty, not to hurt them or harm them. But that doesn't always win me a lot of friends, and I'm okay with that, because I would rather be the catalyst for positive change in your life, to help trigger your karmatic retribution of time, to set you back on the path of living, within your righteous soul print alignment, live the best truth, and for you to go through that personal revelation, that personal day of revelation, than for me to, contort myself to suit your sensibilities so you're okay with me being in your presence. And, I'm not everybody's cup of tea because of that. And I understand that. That's why I don't impose myself or impress myself upon people. I often just try to leave people in wonder about what I mention. And I'm not here to cast judgment. Only God can judge. I'm just here to show a part of yourself that maybe you're not consciously aware of, And that's just something that I have as a talent. And, I do it out of love, not out of like hate. It's kind of like watching a toy that you wind up, and you're supposed to set it off and it like just goes, right? And it's like watching that toy just spin in circles and me just wanting to be like, turn, make a little turn, and then you get a straight shot to make progress and move forward and get out of your systolic loop of negativity. It's loving, gentle guidance in a way that gets you to where you could experience the best chance to learn, and grow and become a better person. And I intentionally seek out people that do that for me too. And I keep myself open, conscious awareness of it. And so I understand what other people might feel when I do that to them intentionally, because people do it to me often, either not consciously or with the intent to harm me because they think it's hurtful to point out my flaws. But in reality, it's like, thank you for allowing me to see that. For me, it's like this: every crack is beautiful. Everything that is imperfect about me is my masterpiece of perfection. It's like, yes, the broken parts of me are beautiful too, And when it's a valuable, vital lesson that I have to learn, I really do work hard to deeply internalize it and go through the becoming process to transmute that, metabolize it, and, contemplate it, and if need be, assimilate it into a new version of myself moving forward. Sometimes it's just a reminder, like you have the same problem that you haven't been able to overcome quite yet, and it's just a constant working of diminishing that part of myself that has yet to like fully overcome my ineptness in that way. And yeah, sure, it's painful to be reminded of your ineptness, or to be rejected by people because you don't quite fit in with them, or for people to point out your flaws and things like that. But you learn to kind of like embrace that pain as a sense of like deep gratitude and appreciation for having that type of humanness and feeling. Because there was a point in time in my life where I couldn't feel anything. And so to me, it's like the whole rainbow effect of all human emotions is, I have gratitude for it. So with that being, part of my practice of my faith and my belief, really just about perfecting this human existence and living out loud the best truth that I know, seeking to constantly refine and to restore integrities, and to sit in shame if I have made a mistake, but not hold it against myself, and wallow in it, but rather like really deeply internalize, this error, if it was like a mistake of an unwitting, or, it was just a outright, wrong thing to do. And I sit in that judgment and I allow myself to reflect and try to transcend and do better and be better moving forward. That's literally all I can do. Some processes take a little bit longer than others, but I usually set myself up to like, I'm going to give myself this much time to accomplish the refinement process of this, and it depends on like how important it is to me and how deeply rooted it is in my heart, in my integrities, in my soul print alignments, for how much work I put into really reintegrating myself with this new knowledge, this new wisdom, this new understanding. With that, I wanted to share something really special to me. So I love old books and old newspapers, and my collection is vast, and I have many different Bibles, different versions that are I've accumulated over the years, basically. This is my most favorite one, though. It is a very small, very old book. It is Galatians to Philemon. It is from the St. Paul's epistles: Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, Titus, and Philemon. It's translated out of the original Greek, and with the former translations diligently compared and revised. It's printed by the New York American Bible Society in the year 1914. So you want a little bit of American 250 history. This goes back. And so, as you can see, it's very well loved. It has been worn over time. There are some stains to it. The pages are yellowed. But this is a very well-loved personal possession. And so I wanted to read something out of this in conclusion of this video. Just in a sense of this stuck out to me today. Some of the verses from this came to mind, and then I thought, it would be nice to talk about this because it references this other book that I had been reading in celebration of America's 250th. It helps to show to the American people my sensibilities of my belief systems, because I think that's really important for you to understand that about me, as me wanting to become a candidate for president. I want you to know this part about me, because this is not something that I'm ashamed of. It's not something that I hide, and I think it's a really good conversation starter. But it also kind of probably helps to contextualize a lot of the things that I say and I do. This isn't something that I usually openly share with everybody, because there are a lot of people that turn off and tune out when you start talking about religion. They vehemently reject it, and that's okay. It's not for everybody. But those to which are receptive of it, I think it's important that those people know that I understand where they're coming from, and I deeply respect it. We can be on that level together. It's kind of like this special tie that we have that other people, may not accept and may not get, but we get it, So with that, I'm going to read from Ephesians 2, chapter 2. And you hath he quickened, who were dead in trespasses and sins, wherein in time past ye walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience, among whom also we all had our conversations in times past, in the lusts of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath, even as others. But God, who is rich in mercy, for his great love wherewith he loves us, even when we were dead in sins, hath quickened us together with Christ. By grace ye are saved, and hath raised us up together, and made us sit together in heavenly places in Christ Jesus, that in the ages to come he might shew the exceeding riches of his grace and his kindness towards us through Christ Jesus. For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works, which God hath before ordained that we should walk in them. Wherefore remembered that ye, being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision, in the flesh made by hands, that at that time ye were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope, and without God in the world. But now, in Christ Jesus, ye, who sometime were far off, are made nigh by the blood of Christ. For he is our peace, who hath made both one, and hath broken down the middle wall of partition between us, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, even the law of commandments contained in ordinances, for to make in himself of twain one new man, so making peace, and that he might reconcile both unto God in one body by the cross, having slain the enmity thereby, and came and preached peace to you which were afar off, and to them that were nigh. For through him both have access by one Spirit unto the Father. Now therefore ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building fitly framed together groweth unto a holy temple in the Lord, in whom ye also are builded together for habitation of God through the Spirit. I have many different notes that I write in my Bibles. So I have these different notes and different outlinings done in pencil. I know it's probably a terrible thing for something that's so old to treat it in such a way, but to me it's like this is my precious possession, and it's mine to have and to behold, and it's important to me to be able to have like these reference points so that when I do go back and read this, I can see the underlining points, like the words that I emphasized at the time, and be like, why did that matter? And I can reflect on it and be like, this meaning, like, what does it mean to me now, in my current situation? And like I said, in that way, I think we really have a reflection of ourselves within the Bible. Like here's another one, a whole entire section that I aligned, and then one specific line that I underlined from Ephesians 4, 16 through 21, that he would grant you, according to the riches of his glory, to be strengthened with might by his Spirit in the inner man, that Christ may dwell in your hearts by faith, that ye, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all saints what is the breadth, the length, and the depth, and the height, and to know the love of Christ, which passeth knowledge, that ye might be filled with all the fullness of God. Now unto him that is able to do exceedingly abundant above all that we ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us. Unto him be glory in the church by Christ Jesus throughout all ages, world without end. Amen. And the emphasis there of the underlining was abundantly above all that we ask or think. And so this really stood out to me today in terms of some things that I was thinking about in anticipation of like what this day was going to really be about and represent and stand for. And, you know, these verses and these chapters came to mind, and I was just like, I really wanted to share this special possession with you, and this conversation of, you know, this book that I've read about like this, you know, political theory of America's founding, the American founding, and like really the sense of how our nation, you know, we're not a Christian nation, but you know, we are a nation that is meant to like be a welcoming, safe space for religion to be practiced, because we know it's a really good way for people to practice good humanity. You know, as long as it's not distorted and perverted and it's not taken to extreme with weird dogmas, and you know, and if you're not using this as a justification to harm others or go to war or to, you know, be racist and bigoted, like or deeply misogynistic, like religion's not about any of those things, you know. And it can be a good thing, but in taken in the wrong context, it can turn into a bad thing. And so I think that there's so much room for us to have open and honest and forthright discussions about religion, and embrace the different versions of it in society, like, and to respect everybody's faith and how they choose to practice it, because it's their way of self-actualizing their best version. And when we see it distorted, or people using it to deceive, or, you know, it's turning hypocritical, or people are living out hypocrisy through it, like, it's incumbent upon us to call that out and say, like, you know, that's not the proper intended use of religion. You know, I don't like the idea of Christian white nationalism. I think it's a hate-fueled, you know, way for people to use the Bible to hide behind, as if it's okay because of some religious rite that you can do wrong to others. I think that any religion that distorts, you know, reality in such a way that would cause others to harm or to hurt, that type of religion is distorted and perverted, and we really should, you know, move away from that sense of practice and try to find like the best truth within it, and allow safe space for that to be cultivated, but also, you know, not allow the propagation, or, you know, the safe space for a religion to conform people to break, you know, our sacred covenant of, you know, our common humanity and our law-abiding, you know, interrelationship with one another. You know, we're independent, but we have an interdependence, and we're in relation with one another. And if our religion is about, you know, breaking us apart and factioning us in then justifying harming certain people, like, we need to move away from that sensibility, because it's not a way that upholds the First Amendment of, you know, freedom of religion. We should be free from religion, you know, coming in and harming us too. And, you know, that really was the spirit of intent that the founding fathers had, was like, we can't give too much power to, you know, religious people, because, you know, it will corrupt them, and it will lead them to distort the value of religion, and then that's no good for them, and it's no good for the people that they lead. And so moving away from those sorts of things is good. The one last thing I will say, there's this great book series that I very much appreciate called The Celestine Prophecy, and one of the final books is, I think it's called The 11th Hour, The Hour of Decision, or something to the effect, and it's like, I'm pretty sure it's the final book in the series. And in that book they talk about all these various religions that come together. And, a little bit of a spoiler alert, the book is kind of surrounded around the sense of like the end times or something like that. And all these different religions like were trying to make the end times happen because they believed that if they can just make the end times happen, then their religion would be the number one standing at the end, sort of thing. And it would do away with all the other people, and then their religion would reign and rule forever, or something like that. And the concept of the book was like all these people from these different religions came together and shared in this community with one another and found the best practices from every religion and put them to use, put them to action. And it was the way that they were able to raise their vibration and to create an internally consistent coherence and resonant frequency that they could share with other people that transcended, the frameworks of religion and brought us to a higher state, a higher order of things, closer to that sense of a God indivisible. It's like how you choose to relate is varied and diverse and different, but your way of attaining connection to that higher consciousness, that higher realm, that is, unique for every religion, but it's the same thing just through a different approach. And combining them all together is the way how we create this unified theory of how our religions are really all about bringing us all together, under our own terms and conditions, but in such a way where we can come together in mutual accords and in peaceful, lasting peace with one another. And this book really works out in its storyline a really beautiful way by which that could be represented. And that informs a lot of my sense of spirituality as well, is very much aligned with that. The whole entire Celestine Prophecy books, I highly encourage people to read them because they more align with my sensibilities of spirituality. I follow what I call my heart song, leading me to synchronicities, places in which I can find connection and be of service. I always find the right people, the right time. I'm in the right place. I have all the resources I need to be of service and for others to be of service to me. I have a meaningful, insightful message for them, and they have one for me as well. And I tune my ears to, what they're there and how and why they matter. And then really try to sense within myself my sense of knowing that I'm supposed to share this insight with you too. And I always find myself in these amazing places meeting beautiful, wonderful people, and we have this shared experience with one another, and it moves us along in the progress of our lives. And to me, that is really beautiful. I believe in synchronicities and insights, and like I said, following my heart song to where I feel most alive and I feel like that's where I belong. And it always brings me, to some fun and interesting places. And to me, that is why I take in, art and literature and music. So I call it my heart song because I love music so much. And take in religion and history and culture, and I watch the connections between people. That's why I valued for a long time social media before it got really bad. Seeing people connect in the digital realm, the types of connections that they made and whatnot, really helps to inform for me my sensibility of my place of belonging, and helps me to better understand why things happen. And that helps me to inform out my models as I'm building out, picture framing, the future that is to come, my anticipation for that, and anticipating that people, are going to bring their best and do their best and be their best. And if not, that's where I become that catalyst to help to bring it out in them, and seek for them to be that for me as well, so I can refine and become a better version. And I also seek, personal development, trainings and, you know, meditations and affirmations. And I'm a very nature rooted person. I touch base with Mother Earth always, and we share conversations, and I speak to the animals, and I speak to the trees, and I commune with them, and I feel that they're a part of me and I'm a part of them, and I go to, as I call it, Mother Earth Gateway, and I do affirmations and prayers, and I share conversations with good Mother Earth. And it's just the sense of knowing everything is alive, the universe is alive, and everything has a spirit, and you just have to attune, your heart and your sight, your mind's eye, and your ears, and you can see an abundance of these beautiful truths and realities that represent and come forth to be observed. And you can see it in all these different forms and fashions. It's most apparent in nature and in organic things, but you can see in inanimate objects as well. And a lot of it is just showing me what I already know, but reflecting back a deeper sense of like how to connect the dots, to make sense of things, and to really interpret kind of like, this formula and this theory and this philosophy, this great vast synthesis that I'm creating, this grand strategy I'm trying to find ways to execute on, is always working in the back of my head. And sometimes I go and observe things without thinking about it, and then when I come back to it, the things that I observed gave me the answer that I was seeking, that I couldn't find by directly trying to solve for the problem. It's something that Albert Einstein did. He used to go for walks, because going for a walk or taking a nap, these sorts of things, where he was in the process of not thinking about the thing that he was working on, he would find an epiphany or an aha or that's funny moment, and it would just dawn on him. Nikola Tesla, the same thing happened when all of his great insights came from him being in an altered state of consciousness, where he wasn't like directly focused on the thing he was working on, and it just arose to him in his conscious awareness in a creative way, in an imaginative way, and how it permeated his consciousness and assimilated in his mind. It made sense in this way where somebody could look at the same thing and not derive the same meaning, but for him, and the way it worked out in his mind, it translated into this pure genius that he was able to execute on. We all have that. It's our human ingenuity, and it's this beautiful, most abundant resource in the universe, renewable resource in the universe. And we humans each have it, and it's, our insights are the greatest things that we have to transact with one another. I very much see the future moving towards us sharing insights, and that's going to be the new version of economy. But it will take time to be able to get there. We have a lot of work to do to help to, shore up our weaknesses and create a welcoming situation everybody can thrive on, so we can take risks for higher things, focus more on our spirituality and our human connection and human relations. We have to first solve for, our societal problems, and we have to survive. We have to find a way to survive. And it's going to take a lot of work to get us in that space, but that's what I'm focused on. That's what I want to make happen. That's why I say, eudaimonia is to be well, and I want everybody to fare well in their lives, and I want us to steward the means, the modes, the methods, the hows, to make that a reality. And it's part of my life's work and my life's purpose to find ways to make that happen. I want us to become the living answer to one of the ultimate questions. How do we as a collective create a collective cultural shift of the whole of humanity to align and in tune with an ever more healthy, sustainable, just, peaceful, resilient world? And, the other question is like, how do we make America work for everyone without the disadvantage of anyone, so nobody gets left behind or kept behind, everyone lives a good life? How do we provision, accommodate, steward, support, care for, and give aid and care about people? How do we become more malleable, adaptable, mobile, efficient, and provide sufficient, supports to build scaffolding for people's lives so that they can level up to live that criterion standard of the good life and sustain and maintain that? And how do we make sure that we keep a balance of equilibrium so that we're constantly living in a state of perpetual abundance and not in excess and waste is growth mentality, because that's a sure path to ruin. How do we give ourselves something that is so much bigger than any one of us alone can achieve, and we recognize, I can't, but we can do this together, and it's something that's worthwhile pursuing, and it's this grand vision, this grand strategy, of what is to come, and you want to be a part of it because it's compelling and it's worth it, worthwhile. But it also has to be very human and very real and honest and authentic. And so I try to find ways to bring that all together. And I think that, it's going to take and providing people with agency, capital, and resource. It's going to require infrastructure, education, and innovation, and proper economics for proper capitalistic economics, proper politics, proper government, the proper intended use in order to achieve these things. But when we emphasize that and we show our work in a very transparent way, it's possible for us to start making real strides in progress. Just by taking a couple of steps, we will have moved so far away from our past models of reality and models for living, and systems for living, that we will be in a totally different universe, a totally different paradigm, totally diverged from the old one. And that'll be a good thing, because where that is leading us towards, as it's taking us away from these old systems, really good things are going to start to fall in place for us, and all the bad things are just going to fall away, and we're going to start having good experiences that we share together. And that's really important to me, because I look at it as we're all in this together, and there is no me without we, and getting everybody to recognize that and see it as not the scary thing that we have to find a way that we all can, just get along. It's a challenge, but it's a worthwhile one to pursue, because that becoming process is life, man. That's where life exists, is in that contention between, and this oscillation between, and us finding that perfect harmonization and balance. And then things will come and shift and throw us off our tracks, and then we find new orientations back. And it's part of the beautiful becoming process of becoming our best version continuously. It's how we form a more perfect union. And when I look to 250 years from now, I hope that future generations look back on us as their ancestors and, really have a sense of pride and appreciation and gratitude for everything that we've done to, set the stage for a tremendous amount of success and thriving for them, good outcome consequences, good options, and helped to instill that sense of that being valuable and important and that mattering to everybody, and carrying that through, and really making sure that that is part of the story that we're really cultivating. What we are to become is based off of the stories we tell ourselves, the stories that we create together. And I want those stories to be good. I want them to be positive. I want them to be based on, respecting and appreciating and valuing one another. It's a hard thing to do when we have so many conflicting interests, and there are a lot of bad actors, nefarious intent in the world, a lot of people that drive value off of harming other individuals. And it really hurts my heart, and it stirs up my righteous anger when that happens. And I had to put myself to good practice to humble myself to the fact that as much as I want to believe in the best in people and bring out the best in people, some people just they're untouchable, they can't be reached, at least not by me. I have faith that, the right person can get through to them, and, they'll have their personal day of revelation, and they'll finally realize, just realize. And, in that moment, it kind of like redeems the time and all of the harm that they did to me and fighting me because they didn't understand me. None of that matters anymore. Because the whole point of, our conflicting was a misunderstanding. And, any of my response was just my determination to settle things so that we understood one another and we can, resolve the conflict. And it doesn't always work for everybody. Some people are not receptive to that. And I'm not always receptive to their methods of doing things. And so I just kind of again, sit in my judgment of things and really work as hard as I can to, heal my heart and my mind for the pain that causes. But value it in a sense of that's a catalyst for me to do self-reflection of, some sort of past trauma that triggered in me that hadn't been resolved. Great opportunity to work on that and work it out, and I become a better person. I may not belong in their world, and, we may not be right for each other, and, we may not be good for each other, but in that moment, that was our insight, and we may not have been able to express it in civil terms, but sometimes it's the friction that leads to the function that comes, to the point where it redeems the time, and, the karmatic retribution of time can finally be resolved in, the inevitabilities of things. But I don't think that that's possible if you close your mind and your heart to it. But I understand how hard it is. It's really hard to forgive people who hurt you. It's really hard to, forgive people who misunderstand you or take you out of context. And it's really hard to, see the consequences of misplacing trust in people. And, finding how people exploit you or, take advantage of you and cause you harm intentionally, where, everybody should be succeeding together and benefiting together, and instead that's not possible because of their choices to attack what they don't understand, or to, confine or conform you, isolate you and prevent you from living your life in the best truth that you know. Take away, your sensibilities, your sense of safety, and do violence and harm to you and your personhood. Those are all really hard things to reconcile. And society has created so many bad actors with nefarious intent that are totally cool with being that bad to individuals, and see somebody who is just an open heart, open mind, wear the heart on the sleeve type of person, and look at them as, an easy target to exploit for their personal gain or something like that. It's easy to see why it's hard to forgive, and why so many people in society are not trusting and, they reject people in society, and they close themselves off. They're easily radicalized. They stop loving, stop living. They get into difficult mindsets that are hard to transcend. It's a challenging experience to be human, but I think religion is a great way to help people to frame a capacity to self-develop, to transcend that, and recognizing that we don't all belong in each other's world, and there's sometimes we need to have degrees of separation from one another, and that society should really create safe space for all different communities to come together as a community, but don't necessarily have to all be, connected so directly with one another. And I think that will solve for a lot of our problems. And once we know that there is safe space for everybody to belong, then we'll be able to do the good, hard, and necessary work of forgiving people for their trespasses. And, there's so much for society to gain if we don't close our door to the outside world, and we don't limit our capacities to sharing experiences. I really think that that is a lot of the profound value of the First Amendment, of the freedom of religion and the freedom of expression and the freedom of assembly and the freedom of speech and the freedom of press. Like, this was the cornerstone to the development of the safe space of belonging for everyone. And without that, we're sure to be confined. We should want to be liberated. It's another really great verse that's in this book of mine that I was reading today. And it's talking specifically about liberation and the power of liberation, and that we're slaves unto this world, and it's such a dark place, but we have the power to be liberated from that, and be blessed by that and grateful for it. That's the spirit of our founding of our nation, was that same magnificent revelation of what liberty really is, what it really truly means to be free and independent. And we should want for that same amazing experience, that same amazing revelation for everybody. America should really embody that. And it's not hard to do. You don't have to conform to a religion to do it. We made it very simple in our nation. Our Bill of Rights is really about cultivating the safe space for everybody to just be themselves, respecting the human person, respecting our differences and diversity, respecting that we need to have rules and bounds and governance, but this isn't about power to rule over the people, but the power of self-governance, and to really cultivate a society where we can trust the people to do right by themselves and others, to self-govern. And so there's no need for interventions by a governing moderating influence external. For the most part, we understand, if all the laws sum up to the one thing: love thy neighbor, which is the living answer to the golden rule, and like I said, add the platinum rule, and that's pretty much all it takes to make this whole thing work. And I think that that's a lot of the value that religion can really give to us if we just respect it on that level. It doesn't have to be this religion or that religion, and you don't have to even practice the religion. Just be spiritual in a sense of that it feels wrong to do wrong by people, and it feels right when you do good for others. and it feels great when people do good for you. And so shouldn't we cultivate more of those types of experiences and feelings? Way better than like the negativity of fighting with one another. Like that's perverted pleasure. That's not something we should be desiring or wanting for ourselves or others. We should want love and happiness and peace, and be that. Live that and do it and be it. Thus we become. And with that, that's everything in regards to this video. I just really wanted to share my insights about this because, it's what stuck out to me today as being important and what mattered. And again, I wanted to share my little book and, give insights in terms of where I'm coming from and what matters to me and how I see the world and make sense of it, my own unique and peculiar way. Because I want you to know my heart, and I want you to, understand my principles and my philosophies, the things that I abide by, how I'm my own master and I obey my heart song, and I really work on cultivating that. And in that sensibility, I'm hoping it'll show that I'm a trustworthy person. I'm a good person with a good heart, and the attitude and direction of my heart is, I deeply care and love and respect and appreciate everybody. And, I find the good in everyone, and I work really, really hard to cultivate forgiveness and to hopefully inspire that in others. And I like to be a guiding light and, a positive, moderating influence in people's life, a catalyst for change, a guide, and somebody who can command the presence of this sensibility that, I really have a knowing and I have an understanding about things that is so much more fundamental than the superficiality of, modern day politics and whatnot. Like, I love, political science. I love military science. I love American history. I study all of these things. But to me, why I love those things is because it comes from a much deeper place of my value sets. What matters to me is understanding those things because I see them as ways to help us come together in this more fundamental way that really truly matters, and I'm hoping for being able to find like-minded individuals that are interested in implementing, all of these initiatives that I want to bring about as president, because they're my methods of integrating, my synthesis of philosophies into, my political theorem into, actual policy frameworks that can be executed upon and administered to bring about an America that is, I think, a really great, way of being, a really good ideal. I think it is the highest ideal that we can then strive for, befit the times and the needs of now. So, and if you can trust in what I'm saying, where I'm coming from, and, where I'm trying to lead to, it will give more of a basis by which we can work together, because again, I can't, but we can make this happen. So this is, the embodiment of the code of trust, and part of that is just being true to who I am and authentic, and being willing to show my peculiar, unabashed self and express what I feel compelled to share, and continuously work towards helping people to get to know me in such a way where they will know that they will be able to entrust me with this might of great care and this tremendous responsibility and this tremendous honor and, this wholly important duty of becoming President of the United States of America. With that, I'm very grateful for your valuable time, attention, and consideration. I appreciate you. Until next time, be well.